Homelessness is a situation that an estimated 1.6 billion people face globally, with nearly 600,000 of those being in the United States. And when we think of homelessness, many of us picture individuals begging for change at red lights or stop signs, or sleeping or camping out on the streets. But it's important to note that homelessness also includes those living in shelters. In fact, most aren't aware that the vast number of homeless people that are housed in shelters are just as vulnerable as those who are unsheltered. And it's also important to note that funding for these shelter programs can be cut or lost at any moment, leaving those who rely on them without a roof over their head. And for this reason, we've decided to focus our attention on the 10 states with the highest percentages of homeless people, sheltered and unsheltered, per capita per 100,000 residents. So let's dive in and learn more about this pressing issue that affects so many cities, states, and individuals and families across the country. Number 10, Delaware. Delaware is the second smallest state in the U.S., but is densely packed with a population of around 1 million. It's also the first entry on our list and earned the spot with the state's homeless rate doubling between 2020 and 2022. During the pandemic, the loss of jobs and reliable income in the state caused a large number of Delaware residents to lose their homes. And in areas where poverty was a particular issue even before that, this was especially problematic. For instance, despite the Black population in Delaware only equating to around 23% of the total population, research shows that around 61% of the homeless population in the state are African Americans. And during the pandemic, Delaware had to use state funding to house many of the homeless in the state as well. In 2020, the estimated number of homeless staying in state-funded motels was around 50, with that number increasing to over 1,000 by February 2022. This is why Delaware doesn't sit very high on the unsheltered homeless list, thanks to state officials responding to the pandemic by attempting to give homeless individuals rooms. By May of 2022, the number of unsheltered homeless in the state was around 2,200, compared to around 154 living unsheltered. Overall, while the numbers may seem low when compared to other states, they have only increased since, and now Delaware sits at our number 10 spot with a homeless rate of 23.6% per capita. Number 9, Nevada. The state of Nevada has a population around 3.2 million, with nearly 3/4 of those being in the Clark County area, Las Vegas primarily. This is also where much of the homeless population resides as well, with over 5,600 individuals experiencing the struggle on any given night. The issue in Las Vegas can essentially be summed up to the same cause for the city's fame, its tourism and casino sectors. While millions travel to Las Vegas every year for a weekend of fun and memories, this has also increased property value throughout the city to unreasonably high numbers for most residents. Finding work in the city is also hard for some, as most of the work is either in the underpaid or underappreciated service industry, or requires a college degree. And while it may be easy for us to question why these people don't just get up and go get a job, research shows that around 74% of the homeless in southern Nevada suffer from mental or disabling conditions. Unfortunately, the state doesn't have the resources to keep up with its growing homeless population and sits at number 9 on our list, with a homeless rate of 24.2% per capita. Number 8, Alaska. Alaska is the largest state in the U.S. and one of the top oil-producing regions in the country, bringing in a substantial amount of revenue for the state since the opening of the transatlantic pipeline in 1977. However, many of the workers on the oil sites in the state are brought in from other states, while many of Alaska's residents face unemployment and homelessness. In Anchorage alone, homelessness services in the city assist upwards of 3,000 people per month, with around 1,400 already living in some form of assisted shelter. Many in Alaska blame drug and alcohol dependency as a main factor for homelessness, saying that many who are on substance don't want to take the shelter as they will be supervised and unable to obtain their drugs or alcohol. And there is some truth to this, as around 23% of the homeless asked in a survey admitted to having a dependency issue. Also, while Native Americans only make up about 15% of the population in the state, They are unfortunately estimated to make up around 40% of the homeless population in Anchorage, which is telling of a whole other issue entirely. And state resources are running thin as they try to stop the increasingly serious homeless issue. But for now, Alaska comes in at number 8 in the nation with a homeless rate of 31.7% per capita. Number 7, Maine. Maine is another northeastern state with a history of high housing costs and increasing homeless rates in recent years. While much of the homelessness has been attributed to drug use, poverty, and other common factors that we've already seen in this list, Maine's increased homelessness in recent years may also have a uniqueness to it that we haven't yet seen. In January 2022, there were a reported 4,400 homeless in the state of Maine, double its numbers from 2 years prior. But of those 4,400, around 2,500 were living in emergency housing provided by the state and locally funded programs like the Emergency Rental Assistance Program and the General Assistance Program. 2023 saw the Maine State Housing Authority close a deal for an additional $21 million that will supposedly be ending homelessness in the state through programs like the ones already in place and new ones that they intend to implement by winter of 2024, just in time to save the homeless of the state from harsh northern winters. With all of this government aid going towards the homeless issue, many homeless from surrounding states have migrated to Maine to seek out the help of these programs. So, good or bad, the appeal of the state that actually helps its homeless has convinced many more to head north, giving the state of Maine a homeless rate of 32.1% per capita. Number 6, Washington. Homelessness has been an issue in the state of Washington for years now. On any given day, there are around 25,000 homeless in the state, with half of them being unsheltered. Officials in Washington have been trying to tackle the issue in dozens of different ways, including a mandatory but free identification card for the homeless in the state. Though some may see this as an unnecessary and wasteful use of government resources, many more recognize it as a move to help those who would otherwise be unable to go to school, get a job, or do anything else requiring government documentation. Washington Governor Jay Inslee has especially recognized the issue and pushed for a $4 billion bond in the legislature that would be put towards more affordable housing in the state and programs for the homeless that have been in jeopardy of budget cuts. And with mortgage rates increasing in recent years at a much faster rate than income, Washington has seen a significant decrease in property sales, which is also tied in with the issue. An estimated $45 million in revenue was lost. That goes from document fees in the state to the Consolidated Homeless Grant, simply due to less paperwork being filed that would be tied in with property and home sales. With the bond proposed, Governor Inslee and other Washington officials hope to fill in the financial gap that's causing outreach aid to stretch thin and hopefully close up the current homeless rate in the state of 32.6% per capita. Number 5, New York. The state of New York has a population just shy of 20 million, with 8.4 million living in New York City alone. Over the last 50 years, the Big Apple has obtained a slightly rotten reputation regarding homelessness, with it being a visible issue everywhere, from Central Park to the world-famous subway system. Homeless people lining the benches, the subways, and the streets of New York have been so common that any movie taking place in the city has the obligatory homeless person interacting with the protagonist or causing some form of disturbance. These issues, however, can be blamed largely on the state itself. Policies regarding mental health institutions in New York led to the discharge of nearly 60,000 mental patients over a 14-year period through the 1960s and 1970s. When the government deinstitutionalized mental health facilities, they failed to reallocate the funds to the necessary housing developments that would be required in such a situation. This, combined with the decline of the single-room housing stock that was responsible for housing so many poverty-stricken people in the city, led to severe increase in homelessness in New York from the 1970s and onward. A controversial policy started in December 2022 by New York City Mayor Eric Adams has tasked NYPD with the unfortunate task of involuntarily institutionalizing anyone exhibiting signs of active mental illness in public. This has outraged many who say it is a violation of human rights, while many police in the city realize the uncomfortably precarious situation that they now face, despite already having tumultuous relations with the public in recent years. Of the 8.4 million who live in New York City, there are an estimated 70,000 homeless, with around 3,400 of them being unsheltered, relying on locations like subway terminals and bridges to keep covered from the elements. Unless the state of New York finds a proper way to address the issue, the alarming homeless rate of 37.4% per capita is likely to increase. Number 4, Hawaii. Hawaii is a beautiful island state in the Pacific Ocean that people from all over the world visit when they want a nice beach getaway, a gorgeous surfing experience, or want to challenge themselves by hiking one of the many volcano trails. The Aloha State also has the country's longest life expectancy at 80.7 years. Unfortunately, as we've seen with Las Vegas, tourism and commerce for the state doesn't always mean that equal attention is put into sectors like mental health or housing development when the funds are divvied back into the community. The major issues on the Hawaiian Islands are the lack of adequate employment and a limited and insanely priced housing market. In 2022, an estimated 3,900 people were evicted from their homes in Hawaii due to being unable to afford the high rent in the state. In 2019, Hawaii had a minimum wage of only $10.20 per hour, when the average rent for a two-bedroom home was over $1,300 per month. This is nearly an $800 gap between affordable housing for minimum wage and actual housing cost. And in the 4 years since then, the minimum wage has only increased by $1.80 per hour, while the cost of living has reached nearly $2,500 a month for Hawaiian residents. With gaps like these, it's no wonder why Hawaii has seen an increasing homeless population in recent years, with a current rate of 41.4% per capita. Number 3, Oregon. Like so many other states, recent years have seen Oregon officials combating the homelessness problems, especially during and post-pandemic. One main cause, according to locals and officials, is the obvious drug problem that Oregon has also been facing, and that type of lifestyle, of course, tends to lead to financial instability. But largely, the main cause in the state is unaffordable and inadequate housing, with the past few years seeing rent prices increasing, even in lower income areas, where families saw no change in monthly earnings. The mayor of Portland had attempted to tackle the issue in the city by banning homeless encampments on the streets and private property, of which he estimated there were over 700. Instead, he proposed large encampments be set up, assisted by the city, that include fresh water sources and access to mental health resources. In addition, a bill proposed in February of 2023 would allocate $1,000 per month to those who qualify. Meanwhile, organizations like the Oregon Community Foundation, Reach Development, and the Portland Housing Center have been working hard for grants boosted by the 2018 Oregon Impact Fund, a fund that granted $20 million to these organizations to develop affordable housing and attempts to lower the very high homeless rate of 42.3% per capita that Oregon now has. Number 2, Vermont. Vermont is a stunning mountain state that sees a lot of ups and downs with its ski slopes and its homeless population. But despite being our number 2 on today's list, Vermont can take some pride in saying that 98% of its homeless population is sheltered. During the pandemic, when high housing costs and low job opportunities increased homeless rates in the state, Vermont officials recognized that much of the Green Mountain State is rural, requiring a higher need for housing in communities where it was harder to access government resources. Currently, there are nearly 3,000 homeless residents of Vermont being housed by state funds allocated for the pandemic in motels and hotels across the state. And while this response was appropriate for the time, the state now faces a crisis as the federal funds that had supported this pandemic-era venture have dried up. House representatives were attempting to secure $21 million toward emergency housing in the mid-year spending plan, but that would only be enough to continue the coverage of the housing situation in the state until the end of June, and this has been met with opposition anyway. The governor of Vermont has also promised $26 million to be set aside for the same thing, though that's only half of what the state had spent in the previous 2 years on hotels for the homeless. If the state doesn't find a solution soon, it will face an unsheltered homeless crisis that it's been able to avoid thus far. Currently, Vermont's homeless population is a staggering 43.1% per capita. Number 1. California. California is a stunningly diverse state that has also faced a large homeless issue over the years, maintaining a top spot in most lists like this for a long time now. The biggest cause for this, as we've seen with other states, has been a combination of unaffordable housing and low income, causing California to become the most pervasive example of homelessness in the U.S. The wage-to-housing cost gap is so bad that by 2030, an estimated 1.2 million new and affordable homes would need to be built in the state to fill the needs of low-income families. Those who can afford housing in the state can barely afford to live, with nearly 1 in 8 Californians reportedly not having the resources to meet their basic needs. And despite officials throughout the state spending $20.6 billion on housing and homelessness since 2018, the state is now home to 30% of the United States' total homeless population. This has forced legislators in the state to question where the funding is going, prompting an audit into 5 of the state's homelessness programs that will last until October 2023 and cost an estimated $743,000. Considering how much taxpayer money has been spent to curb the problem just to see it consistently worsen, it's no wonder that taxpayers and officials alike are demanding answers. If something isn't done, California will most likely keep its top spot and see its overwhelming homeless population of 43.7% per capita continue to rise. Homelessness is an unfortunate situation that many face every single night and is not an issue to be taken lightly. If you or someone you know is facing possible homelessness, please do not hesitate to seek out help through local organizations and housing assistance opportunities. It varies from state to state, but you can always dial the homeless hotline at 211 or go to 211.org to find a local shelter. As always, thanks for watching, and please don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons and comment with any suggestions for future videos.